Okay, okay. Take your seats. Settle down. Settle down. Welcome to the Road to Concord 101. This class is about all things connected to the path of history leading from Mount Sinai to Lexington Green and the individual liberty and freedom of man. If you're in the wrong place, feel free to get up and go see the registrar's office about dropping this class, preferably before you meet the professor. In the event you do not already know this, your professor is Joe Bakanovic, and he has a bit of a reputation on campus. He is most definitely an acquired taste, but if you can learn to tolerate him, he will make you better at defending your position, whatever it may be. I'm T.A. Charlie. I'm here to help the professor, but more importantly, you. We encourage you to take notes, and if you have questions, feel free to call. If you'd like the number, please email us. You can also post your questions in the comments, and we'll get the professor's attention. Part of my job is to let you know a little bit about your professor. As I said earlier, the professor has that bit of a reputation on campus. Not all of it is good. Let me help explain a little with a story about how I came to be the professor's TA. I was invited to attend one of his classes. My first impression of the professor was that he was an egotistical, narcissistic know-it-all. My intent after only a few minutes of class was never to attend another class with this professor. But after class, Professor Joe came up to me and thanked me for my class participation and told me that my perspective was valuable, and he asked me to keep coming to class. This actually took me back a little. To me, he seemed inconsistent. What was I to do? I decided to continue coming to his classes. As I did, I actually started doing what he does encourage students to do. Check behind him and see if what he is teaching is actually correct. I have done this over and over again, and generally speaking, I found what he teaches to be backed by sound, valid, and rational arguments from reputable sources. When I have challenged him and provided a sound, valid, and rational argument in opposition to his current position, he immediately changed his position and thanked me for correcting him. Why do I tell you all this? Professor Joe is a little rough around the edges, especially in the way he delivers his content. But if you stick with him and listen to what he teaches and then go and check his sources, you will likely find, as I did, he will help you better understand the world around you and help you to think better and hopefully to live better. At least that is our hope. One last note. This class builds on itself. Therefore, it is important to attend class regularly. We will not always have time to go over previously covered material. If you are new, we suggest you watch our older classes. We've created playlists to help you with those things we feel are of special importance. Now, let's get started.
Good morning. It's Thursday, September 25th, 2025. Welcome to the Road to Concord. I'm flying solo at the moment. Charlie was in studio for a little while there, but he got called away with family matters. And since he's not here, I love his new intro, but he's a little wooden. Well, it's probably because he's a boomer. But, I'm going to get him to re-record it with a little bit more life. Might be a challenge for him. It's just the way he is. But, I kind of like messing with him. All right. Today, title of the show today should have caught your attention by now, hopefully, if you're with us for the reasons we hope you're here. Is morality universal? And if not, how can we govern ourselves? And I got a full-blown philosopher's hat on here today, folks. And I want to have a conversation with you about some things that I know a lot of us probably don't even think about. I see most of your classmates are still missing. They'll catch up and catch the replay. I'm just going to get into this. You know how we start these type of things when we're looking at words. We got to get to our definitions. This is one case, one example where our dictionary is not going to do us as much justice as it in my opinion, doesn't do the job that it's supposed to do. People are starting to check in. There's Marianne. She's here. So we're dealing with morality. So the first thing I did is I went and looked up morality. And this time I am just using the Webster's dictionary. And it says a moral discourse, a statement or a lesson, a literary or other imaginative work teaching a moral lesson, a doctrine or system of moral conduct. Okay, moralities, particular moral principles or rules of conduct, conformity to ideals of right human conduct. This is the one: moral conduct, virtue, the pursuit of the virtuous life, pursuit of happiness. All right, so all of this refers me back to moral. So I went and looked up moral. It's an adjective, and it says of or relating to principles of right and wrong in behavior, ethical. Okay, so then we're going to go to ethics because that's one of the words, I was using today. It's a set of moral principles, a theory or system of moral values. Now, folks, this is a fallacy, and I'm going to quit right there because I have found myself a fallacy in the dictionary. What do I mean by that? Well, if the definition of moral is to go see ethics, and the definition of ethics is to go see moral, that's called circular reasoning. In other words, what is morality? Well, it's ethics. Okay, well, what is ethics? Well, it's morality. This is the thing you sometimes hear me talk about, and I do it. It's meant to be humorous, but that's life. What's life? Well, it's a box of cereal. Oh, it is? How much does it cost? Well, it's 69 cents. Well, where can I get it? Well, you can't get it. Oh, well, that's life, I guess. I can't get the cereal. So, what's life? A box of cereal. It's two people talking to each other and you go round and around in a circle. So this is something that has bugged me since the days I was in college back in the early 90s. And I've never been able to wrestle this one to the ground. Is morality universal? My personal opinion is that yes, it is. Well, why? The dictionary doesn't say it is. It's, just any set of moral standards or moral codes, depending on your culture. Okay. So then let me ask you a question. This is going to be a little bit of a disjuncted class. It's not going to flow as smoothly as I'd like it to, but that's because working on this for over 20 something years now, almost 30 years, I still haven't been able to get this down in my head in a way that I can explain it to others. I know where I'm going with this, but it's not an easy thing to explain to most people because what I'm going to do here today makes most people's head hurt. If morality is not universal, if it doesn't apply, if there's not a universal set of moral standards, then how can we evaluate ourselves? How can we even write laws? Because if what's right for you is not right for me, then where do I get the justification to enforce a law that goes against your moral standard? See, this is the heart of the First Amendment. They were arguing with right of conscience in the right to pursue happiness, the virtuous moral life. Now, it was connected to their ideas of different denominations of Christian belief. The Quakers believed this was the moral life according to the Bible, and it was different from the Puritans, which is different from, the Protestants, different from the Lutherans, et cetera, et cetera. So they didn't want laws telling them how to have to govern their pursuit of their moral and virtuous life according to the scriptures. Well, we've abandoned the Bible as our source, by and large, our society has, as our source of morality. So by what standard do I imply morality now? Well, the left would say, well, we've got to do it according to collective rights. Okay, well, there's no such thing as a collective right. That's a fiction. And that's a whole different conversation that I will have on another day. But what they're actually arguing is minority rights for minorities collectively. And so because people of certain skin color are fewer in number here in the United States than maybe Caucasians, we got to defend their rights. And they'll say, well, we're defending minority rights. Well, no, you're not, because the smallest minority is the individual. And they never defend the rights of the individual. It's always the rights of the group that they claim to be representing. Okay, so where am I going with this? Well, that's very simple. how does this society condemn the original founders' society? Slavery, bigotry, racism. How can you condemn that if there isn't a moral universal constant? You say, well, we know better than you. Oh, well, now you're getting into superiority problems. Now you're going to be arrogant. Now you're going to be elitist, that your system's just better than theirs. By what standard? How do you what standard are you going to argue that your moral beliefs are better than another? Unless there's a universal, what I mean by that is objective standard, a standard that applies to all sentient beings everywhere at all times, not just in this world, but in any world where we might stumble across other sentient beings. If there isn't a moral law that applies to all, making you a moral agent, you're answerable to that moral law, then how do you judge another society, another culture? How can you say Islam's wrong for subjugating women? You're a Western girl, you're all in this feminist movement and this women's lib stuff. Well, a lot of feminists will still embrace Islam. Well, that's inconsistent, which leads to incoherency. Now you're starting to understand why I was doing that talk on consistency and coherency just not too long ago. We can't talk about morality unless we understand consistent and coherent. Because if there's not a universal law, then the idea of morality is inconsistent. And that leads to global incoherence. In other words, chaos. So for me, the notion of morality, to me, must be universal somehow. There has to be a universal, objective standard of what is right and wrong for human behavior. Now, if that's the case, then ethics becomes essentially the law. That's the standards, the principles, guardrails that we put in place that are intended to help keep us from straying off that narrow path of what is, what we call morality. So morality would be the principle. That's the ice cream. Ethics is going to be the guardrail that we put around it. Well, morality is going to be the ideal. Ethics is the principle. Let me be consistent here with the way I use my words. My apologies. I made a boo-boo. So morality is going to be the ideal, the target. It's an objective ideal. It applies to everybody equally across all time and all places. Principles, ethics are going to be our principles, the guardrails, the system we design to help make sure we are shooting for the target. Unfortunately, in our world today, ethics usually don't align our business and legal ethics don't align with our more expressed moral ideals, moral targets, goals. And this leads us to nothing but confusion in our world. Ethics today is often an attempt to justify or encourage violations of the moral codes we claim to adhere to. Free speech with Charlie Kirk, this is a perfect example. Well, we've got to allow free speech. You can't shut down Jimmy Kimmel. Well, Jimmy Kimmel was advocating violence. He was dehumanizing a large part of this country by saying the shooter was MAGA, and that implying that MAGA is violent because they shot their own people. Well, no, he's leftist. The shooter was a leftist. And by saying that it was MAGA, you're justifying the violence against MAGA. Look, they're so evil that they shoot their own people. And he's advocating violence. And that's what he is. It's an action. But we also have free speech. I have to be allowed to, in the name of free speech, I have to be allowed to do things that aren't speech. I have to be allowed to burn a flag. I have to be allowed to strut my depravity down Main Street, public street, barely if clothed at all, in New York City with children around. I have to be able to do lewd and lascivious things in the name of free speech. Well, that's not speech. That's an action, folks. And even if it was, it exceeds the boundaries of what's moral. But all in the name of free speech, the ethic, defend the ideal, we end up defending the opposite of what we're supposed to be doing in the name of ethics. That's because I think we've perverted that word. And then in the name of freedom of religion, we have the same problem with Islam. Well, we have freedom of religion, so the Muslims have to be able to speak, even though they're advocating the overthrow of the United States and the institution of Sharia law. We got to allow it because it's free speech and freedom of religion. Well, no, you don't have to allow that, because that's national suicide now. Now, how do we judge any of this? All I've been doing so far, at least in my mind, is confusing the heck out of anybody that's listening to me. So how do we start to put some sort of sense of, I don't know, how do we put any order to this at all? Well, the first thing I want to do is, let's look and see. This is a Bible-based show. Scriptural worldview here on this show. So I'm going to take you to Romans 2. I'm using the NASB Bible. I'm just going to just stick with me here. Romans 2, verse 13. For it is not the hearers of the law who are righteous before God, but the doers of the law who will be justified. And by the way, if you're a visible church Christian, normal Christian where the law has been done away with, Paul just gave you a problem there. How do you do a law that was done away with? Anyhow. Verse 14, for when Gentiles who do not have the law instinctively perform the requirements of the law, these, the Gentiles, though not having the law, are a law to themselves, in that they show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience testifying, and their thoughts alternately accusing or else defending them. So what's Paul saying? Paul is saying that all of us, every human being, is born with the principles of what is right and wrong, universally right and wrong in their hearts. So when the modern day liberals, the progressives of this world, the communists, the secular humanists tell you that morality and sexuality, these are all social constructs. They're made up by society. They're not entirely wrong. Their perversion of the universal objective target, the ideal, their perversion of it is a social construct. And they do pervert the objective universal idea of right and wrong that we are all born with. And they do so from birth. And the Bible even says that we all go astray from that universal idea of right and wrong from the moment of birth. And this is why the Bible tells adults to bring up your children in the ways of the scriptures, in the path that you're supposed to walk, in the way of the objective universal idea of right and wrong, so that they will remember it when they get older. All right. That's the Bible, Joe. Yes, it is. There is a modern day study on this. I'm going to bring this one up. Let me get this up here for you. This is from University of Oxford News and Events. And all I need here is the title. That's all I need. You can read the rest if you want. It's not a problem. Tell you what, let me do this. I'll give it to Charlie since he's able to be back with us now. Charlie, if you'd get that posted, share the link with everybody, and then put that in the permanent record for Rumble, just in the permanent comment section for me. I'd appreciate that. But anyhow, from Oxford University, 7 moral rules found all around the world. Anthropologists at the University of Oxford have discovered that what they believe to be 7 universal moral rules, laws, universal, moral, universal morality, 7 basic principles. Hold on to this. If you're interested, you can go all the way down here, and there's the study. Okay, you click on that, you can read the actual study. Now, if you've been with me any length of time, you know that I have, or you might be aware that I have told you that there was a study that we had to read when I was in sociology class back in 93, 94, somewhere in there. And it was an older study. It had already been out. It was known at that time. This study I just linked you to is relatively modern. It was done after the year 2000. I think it was done after the year 2010. And it claims to be the first study that did a universal study. Well, wrong. One of the first things you're supposed to do if you're going to do that type of a study is do your research to see if anybody's done your work before. And there was a lady, an anthropologist, scientist, female scientist, and I think she did this back in the 70s, if I remember right, 60s or 70s. But she did a massive study across as many known cultures, dead and alive, current cultures and ancient cultures that were long since extinct. And she found that there are universal principles that apply to every known society on Earth, ever, period. Everything she could find. I have tried to find that study. I remember learning it. I had to read it, but you can't find it anymore. The internet is not our friend because of the search engines, the algorithms. Doesn't want us to learn this. So I'm like, okay. So there's a universal law according to my Bible. And these studies tell me there are universal laws. Does the Bible give me any more help? Oh, yeah. Biblical culture sure does. Remember that study found 7 principles that go across all cultures? Have you ever heard of the Noahide laws? There are 7 of them. Ooh. Well, 7 doesn't necessarily, just because there's 7 Noahide laws, that doesn't necessarily mean anything with the 7 principles that study I just showed you found. In fact, that study shows that, they're not the same. Only maybe they are. I want to show you what I mean and why I use ice cream and flavors. If you can give me a better illustration, please let me know. I'll be happy to change it. But for now, I'm going to stick to the ice cream. The ice cream is the ideal, the target. The 7 Noahide laws do not profane God's oneness in any way. Acknowledge that there is a single creator who cares about what we are doing and desires that we take care of his creation. That's straight out of Genesis. That's a Noahide law. According to the scriptures, that applies to everybody. Jew, Gentile, doesn't matter. Number 2, do not curse your creator. No matter how angry you get, don't curse him. Number 3, do not murder. That doesn't say don't kill. Do not do murder. Value human life. Do not eat a limb of a still living animal. Okay, so up till now, you can recognize the flavor that we're being served of the ice cream. But what does this flavor got anything to do? Well, read it. This is the ice cream, but it's not actually the ideal. The ideal is respect the life of all God's creatures. As intelligent beings, we have a duty not to cause undue pain to other creatures or to just kill them for fun. That's what that's about. So when I was a kid and I used to shoot minnows in the ditch, I was violating the 4th Noahide law. When you get farther and farther away from these ideals, you become more and more depraved, and it becomes easier and easier to live comfortably outside of this universal moral law. And that's when the chaos starts. Number 5, do not steal. Well, then that denotes and implies property, personal property. Number 6, harness and channel the human libido. What that is basically about is don't be sexually depraved or immoral. And number 7, establish courts of law and ensure justice in our world. Justice according to the other 5 laws, or 6 laws rather. These are the Noahide laws. There are 7 of them. Incidentally, these are 7 laws that were found by that study that I learned in the early 90s. They're universal. Plus, respect for the dead and our elders, especially our parents and our family. That was one that was universal. I wish, if I ever find that study, we'll bring it back to you. But we pervert these things and these ideas. And we end up over time turning them on their head, which is Isaiah 5:20-21. It says, woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who substitute darkness for light and light for darkness, who substitute bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and clever in their own sight. Woe to the progressive in my way of looking at things. Me, my way. Because they pervert these things. So what am I looking at here? Let's start putting this in a little bit of tabletop worldview. The Declaration of Independence, in a way, is actually an assertion of universal morality. We think that it's apparent to everybody. It's just inherently obvious. There's a creator. All rights come from the creator. That includes the right to life, your life, which implies the right to your free will. And your free will is liberty to use it as you deem fit. And the pursuit of happiness. Well, that's to pursue the moral and virtuous life. But you also have the right to your personal property, et cetera, et cetera. That's the universal moral law being established there. That's the what and the why of the United States of America. That gives us our national moral focus, our moral compass. The Constitution is our ethics. Constitution, Bill of Rights, they constitute our ethics. This is how we are going to abide by this asserted universal moral law that applies to all people. All men are created equal. All humans are created equal. We know we're not physically, not intellectually, not with talents, not with money, but we are created equally before our Creator, equally morally. We're equal in the eyes of universal morality, so that morality is the ice cream. And in our case, the Declaration is asserting the ice cream. The Constitution is the flavor. Or if you want, it's how we're going to serve up the ice cream. Now, if you do some looking into this, you'll find that our founding fathers went according to natural law. Natural law according to the way Locke understood it. Locke derived his theory of natural law from Romans 1 and 2. The book of Romans, out of the Bible. Not my words, his. So Locke is getting his natural law from revealed law. Okay. Natural law is morality. That's the target. That's the objective law. And the revealed law is our ethics. What? Joe, you're heresy. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. Charlie, I want you to pop on here for just a moment if you can. And I'm going to explain something. I want you to see if you have a problem with this. Natural law would be the objective truth for all moral agents. Anybody who has to answer to their creator. That's the object. It applies to everybody equally. That's the all men are created equal thing. So you should be equal before the law as well. Well, if Paul is right in Romans 1 and 2, and all Gentiles have this natural law born into them, then the revealed law would be nothing more than Yahweh explaining how the natural law is supposed to work to his people, parallel to the way the New Testament explains how the Old Testament was supposed to work. Can you see those parallels?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the revealed law is the explanation of how the natural law is supposed to be understood and lived.
Right. And that's what happened with the Ten Commandments and stuff too. It was actually codifying they call them the Noahide laws, now, but that it was just codifying that and making it more explicit. And then Yeshua actually took it another step with, like the Sermon on the Mount and things like that.
Drove it into the heart.
Yeah, explaining it even more precisely, if you will.
He was explaining the new covenant that was promised in Jeremiah and Ezekiel.
Right.
Yeah. So he's going to take those same laws that applied in the old times, and now, instead of being written on cold stone, he's going to drive them into your heart. In other words, and this is exactly what Jefferson said, instead of being an external sword, now it becomes an internal control that purifies yourself, your will, your mind, your body, your essence, purifies it at the fountainhead in the seat of your own will. Because it's no longer something that you don't do it because you're afraid of being punished. Now you don't do it because you don't want to. So the New Testament just explains what the Old promised. In a very similar way, the Declaration of Independence expresses the natural law, and the Constitution gives us the ethics, codifying the explanation. Right. And it shows us how we're going to adhere to it. Can you see the parallels in my thinking here?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where a lot of people get confused because they separate the Declaration from the Constitution.
Okay. So now, if we do not have a system of objective law, moral law, a right and wrong that applies to all humans everywhere, then how can we ever compare one society or one system to another?
You can't
No, you can't.
without
How
some
could we
kind of objective
compare?
truth.
Right. Well, then how can you compare the way you live your life to the way anybody else in society lives theirs?
You can't.
Then how can you write a law that says it's illegal for you to do this, but somebody else can do that? How could all those laws become is might makes right?
Right. I was going to say the only way that works is the majority says that, you know, uh, everybody that has pink hair cannot, do such and so, you know, and, and there's only one person out of the 1,000 that has pink hair. So the majority wins.
Now,
Yeah, that's
this is what the spirit of this age is trying to do with democracy. Might makes right. So what the spirit of the age is saying is that they can legislate morality. By more people voting for it than anybody else, they think that makes it right. So if I have 3 people, 2 are wolves and 1's a lamb, and we're going to vote on what's for dinner,
what's for dinner. Yeah.
the lamb's going to get murdered. And that's okay
Right.
because of that system of ethics.
Yeah, I was going to say that's ethics. That's not morality, at least in my view.
Bingo. Exactly. You're starting to see where I'm going at.
I had that problem when I was working for the government, because I'd have to go through this ethics training and things like that. And some of those supposed ethics would actually violate my morality. And so I had cognitive dissonance there. And I'm like, so hold on, my morality trumps your ethics. So what do we do here? And, at least from my view. So that caused me some heartache at that time.
So you see, the Declaration of Independence is pointing to God, the creator. The Constitution was written by and points to man's understanding of how to live according to God's declaration.
Right.
Ethics is man-based. Morality is creator-based. It has to be.
Yes.
It must be. Anything else leads to a problem. Wait till we come back from the break. I'm going to introduce you to a man that you were taught is a deist. And I'm going to ask you to tell me whether or not you think he's a deist. 3-minute break, Charlie. We'll come back and we'll keep going. Okay. Let me see if I can get this done. This is going to be eye-opening for a lot of you because I'm going to quote two deists, and they're dealing with morality. They both are. The difference between morality and ethics. Now, and Charlie, I'm going to ask you if you know who this is in just a second and see if anybody else in the class knows. This is from a letter, one of our founding fathers writing to somebody who questioned him. It's to Ezra Stiles, 9 March 1790. This founding father, and he's a big one, says, "You desire to know something of my religion. It is the first time I have been questioned upon it, but I cannot take your curiosity amiss and shall endeavor in a few words to gratify it. Here is my creed. I believe in one God, the creator of the universe, that he governs by his providence, that he ought to be worshipped, that the most acceptable service we render to him is doing good to his other children, that the soul of man is immortal and will be treated with justice in another life, respecting its conduct in this. These I take to be the fundamental points in all sound religion, and I regard them as you do in whatever sect I meet with them." Sect, denomination. Anybody have any idea who wrote that? Charlie, you have any idea who wrote that?
If I were to take a guess, I would say Thomas Jefferson. We have
Jimmy
Ben
Zinker
Franklin.
Jimmy Zinker has it.
Oh, Jimmy Zinker. Oh, I should have looked to see
Franklin.
who wrote that. I could have cheated because if it was Jimmy, I knew he'd be right.
It was
Jimmy.
Benjamin Franklin,
Ben Franklin,
the
okay.
supposed deist. Does that sound
Yes.
like a deist to you?
Good job, Jimmy.
He said that we have to
should've looked at the
recognize
names.
God and serve him by serving our fellow man, which is this, folks. Love God with all your heart and all your might, and then love your neighbor as you love yourself. And upon that hangs all the rest of the law. This is a Venn diagram. All of the commandments in the Old Testament about loving God. And then on the right, all the commandments in the Old Testament about loving your neighbor. And that is the sum of the law. Where do you think Ben Franklin got his creed from? Right there, folks.
Yep.
Ben knew the Bible. Now, I'm going to do this again. This one's going to be a little different. This one's going to shock you. Here's another deist, folks. I quote this all the time, but I have never read you parts. This is only part of the poem from which it comes. Now, bear with me. This is going to be a little lengthy, but not really that long. This is a supposed deist writing in response to atheists in the time of the Great Enlightenment. It says, "Insipid writer, you pretend to draw for your readers the portraits of your three impostors. How is it that witlessly you have become the fourth? Why, poor enemy of the supreme essence, do you confuse Muhammad and the Creator, and the deeds of man with God, his author? Criticize the servant, but respect the master. God should not suffer from the stupidity of the priest. Let us recognize this God, although he is poorly served. My lodging is filled with lizards and rats, but the architect exists, and anyone who denies it is touched with madness under the guise of wisdom. Consult Zoroastrists and Minos and Solon, and the martyr Socrates and the great Cicero. They all adored a master, a judge, a father. This sublime system is necessary to man. It is the sacred tie that binds society, the first foundation of holy equity, the bridle to the wicked, the hope of the just. If the heavens, stripped of his noble imprint, could ever cease to attest to his being, if God did not exist, it would be necessary to invent him." That's the line I always quote you. "Let the wise man announce him, and kings fear him. Kings, if you oppress me, if your eminence disdain the tears of the innocent that you cause to flow, my avenger is in the heavens. Learn to tremble. Such, at least, is the fruit of a useful creed." I want to stop right there. My avenger is in the heavens. Fear him. A deist believes that God made the universe, wound it up, and took off for parts unknown, and does not care what happens with man anymore. Voltaire, the French philosopher who wrote those words, says that if you are going to oppress me, my avenger lives. Now, he has a universalist idea of the creator. He'll fit in very well with the Masons today, modern Masons, where they believe in just any higher power. He's quoting all sorts of different gods there. But notice what he says. He believes that the creator will avenge him. That's not a deist. That's not a deist. It doesn't meet the definition. And yet, our schools teach that Voltaire was a deist. Notice what he's saying. He's saying human society cannot exist without an acknowledgement that right and wrong flows from the creator of all things. Our founding fathers told us that we will not remain free if we do not remain moral, and that there is no morality divorced from reverence to a creator. Now, why would we want to get away from that? Well, here's one of the biggest problems you have with this. And Voltaire was screaming it from the rafters. If you acknowledge that there is a creator, then there is an objective, universal right and wrong. That creator, that universal lawgiver, decides what right and wrong is. That creates a duty to your fellow man, and you must also answer to your creator. And we do not want to be bound by duty. So what do? Instead of the duty created by the objective universal moral law, we create ethics. And instead of the duty, we get around it. We avoid that duty. I'll give you a perfect example. We are created equal. Created, conceived, not born. It doesn't say born equal. You are conceived equal because you are a creation of the creator. So from the moment of conception, you are equal in his eyes. You are equal moral agents. That unborn child is not your body.
You mean from the point of conception? That means
that is the definition of
wrong.
Yes, it would be murder.
Oh,
but then you have
they didn't even know about that stuff back then, did they?
Nope. But now you have one of the world's leading ethicists, Peter Singer, who comes along and says, well, you're not human until the point of consciousness. And he says that happens sometime around the age of 3. And he advocates you should be able to abort your child up to the age of 3. That's not an abortion, that's murder.
Yeah.
As soon as you unpin from the objective moral standard, you have taken a wild running, flying leap down the slippery slope toward lawlessness. Now, once you've done that, how do you correct your society? How do I codify the law if what's right for you is not right for me? Other than might makes right. Logic, Joe, you get on logic all the time. Logic's going to save me. Oh, really? Well, I just logically told you that the unborn's not a person anymore. I can make a sound, valid, and rational argument for that. I can. One of my favorite stories I like. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I was just going to say, I have a perfect example of this.
Okay.
I came out of Mormonism. Mormonism, their basic beliefs, you even told me it was logical. It was sound and valid, but
if you accept their premises, it is a sound, are flawed,
faulty.
Yes.
And when you get to the other end, it's the same thing like computer programming. You know, I used to do that for a living too. Garbage in, garbage out.
So now if you reject the lawgiver, the universal lawgiver, the creator, and then you say this is what is and isn't moral, who are you claiming to be?
They're claiming to be God.
Bingo. My philosophy teacher, well, my logic teacher, my basic Logic 101 teacher, genius. He literally was. He was a child genius. He's an American geniuses, who's who of American geniuses. He did our logic class, and he gave me a sound, valid, and rational argument for why the unborn is not human and that abortion is not murder. Did that in the first day of class. And then he also told us that our final exam would be to prove that God exists or that the unborn is a human. That's, that or prove the negation of it. That was going to be our final exam. Come the final exam, I didn't hand in a paper. And I was making straight A's in that class, man. I was sailing through it. And I was about to fail because of my final. And he asked me in class, 110 people in the auditorium. He goes, Joe, you didn't turn in a paper. I said, no, I want to do my paper here now in front of everybody. And he smiled and he said, okay, cool. I said, well, I am going to prove God exists and that the unborn is a person. Now, part of his definition was that in order to be a person, you have to be rational. Okay. I remembered that. So the day we had to do this, I got up and I started walking because he was up on an elevated platform. It's like a theater. I come down the theater and I'm going to walk up onto the platform with him. He's sitting on a stool. I start walking down and I said, I need to stipulate that we live in the United States of America and we're under American law. He goes, well, yeah, that's obvious. That's a given. I said, so that's a factual and objective fact. Yes. And I said, objective fact, we're under American law, and I'm getting closer to the stage. Yeah. I said, so we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created by the Creator. And his smile starts to go away, and I'm walking up the stairs to the stage in front of the whole class. And I have everybody's attention now. He goes, well, yeah. And I said, we're created with certain inalienable rights. Created, not born. Well, yeah. And the unborn has his own DNA. Yeah. Human DNA. Yeah. And I'm walking closer to him. I said, ergo, if you kill him or her before they're born, this is, by definition, murder. Both according to the Creator, you say, exists because we are in the United States, an objective fact that you conceded, and by the law. And he goes, well, no. And I said, wait a minute. I'm stopped. I'm just a few feet from him now. I said, my argument is sound, is it not? He goes, well, yeah. I said, and it's valid. And he goes, well, yeah. And I said, and it's rational. Yeah. And I said, therefore, you now believe in God and you think the unborn is a human being. He goes, well, no. And I said, well, that's irrational, isn't it? And I start to walk toward him again. And the smile left his face. And I said, and since you are now irrational, you are no longer human by your own definition. Ergo, it won't be murder if I end your life. And he literally fell off his stool backwards on his butt on the floor. And all of a sudden he starts laughing and he says, A+. And now afterwards in the student teachers lounge where students were not allowed to go, I'm allowed to go. And I asked him, I said, so you've changed your, and he goes, no. And I said, so you're irrational. And he just kind of looks at me, and he was never able to get around to that. He was a big time liberal, but he became a really good friend. And all because you live in the United States. It's a fact you can't get away from. What I had just done to him was brought him face to face with the fact that his logic was flawed because he had no fear of the fountainhead of logic. See, if there's not a universal lawgiver that governs the laws of logic, then you are the own lawgiver of how you use it, which will lead you to come into conflict with yourself, a la Ayn Rand. I'm not going to get into her statements on abortion. Let's just stick with her thing on Social Security. I paid into it, therefore I should take it. Social Security is by definition socialism. But the law does not guarantee you that you get it back. You are not paying into anything that you own. Go read the law. It really
is the greatest Ponzi scheme that was ever developed?
Yes.
Oh, geez.
If the law guaranteed that you'd get your money back if you died before you turned 65, then you'd get your family, your estate would get your money back, right?
Right. Yeah.
Doesn't happen.
Doesn't happen.
It's because the law is not written that way. The law was written much the same way that the laws of welfare were written. They were written to assure Democratic voters. That's what that was all about. And they did it in a way that painted themselves as being the compassionate and moral party, even though what they were actually doing was enslaving you.
Yeah. Oh, what they've done to the Black American community is...
Yes. Anytime...
It's atrocious.
Yes.
They're in worse slavery now in many ways than they were when in traditional slavery.
There are more white folks on... At least there were when I was in college.
That's true. That's true. It's
on,
not just...
yes.
Yeah, it encompasses more than just... But
it has destroyed Appalachia. It has destroyed the Appalachian community.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. Oh, gosh. Going back to where my wife came from. Oh, my gosh. It's horrible.
Morality must carry the sense of duty and responsibility. Morality must carry a sense of accountability. If there's no accountability, then who gives a crap? Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. So if you are accountable, then what body do I kick and put in jail if morality is explained in terms of the collective? If morality is explained in terms of race or LGBT community or anything other than the individual, then how do I punish that? I can't put a corporation in jail. So how do I assert moral accountability to a corporate? Well, you fine it. That's not moral accountability. I can't hold a collective morally accountable, which is exactly why the lawless spirit pushes collective accountability. Folks, that's fascism. Collectivism is corporatism. It's treating a group of people as one body. It's a form of fascism. Saying, well, Joe, the body of the Messiah. Here's the difference. The collective forces you into it against your will. You have to choose and willingly align yourself with the body of the Messiah. You see the difference? One tramples free will, one does not. Trampling free will is a violation of natural law. Voluntarily saying, I choose that way, the way, and aligning myself with it is not a violation of natural law. The progressive, the secular humanist never does that. They're the sword. They will kill you if you do not align. And that's why they kill each other. Because they're constantly fighting to be the god of their own ideology. So if you have no lawgiver, then how do you know physics is going to work tomorrow the same way it does today? Well, Joe, that's just natural law. Okay, so then at the very least, you must be a Gaiist. You must think that the universe is consciously awake and makes its own laws. Good luck with that. Doesn't work that way, but okay. At least that, believe in the force, which is it's just another form of Gaiism. It's another flavor of that idea, that thought. So there has to be a lawgiver, and if the lawgiver gives the law, it's a universal law. It applies to everything that the lawgiver created. By definition, that's God. Morality is our target. Universal morality is our target. It allows for an objective standard to be created, to be raised up. That's ethics. That's proper ethics. Ethics are human laws written in conformity to the objective standard, natural law. We're going to start explaining that 1 week from today. We're going to derive natural law. This is my own argument, but I piggyback off of Locke. I go one step back further than they do. I am going to derive an individual sense of morality that conforms perfectly with the Bible. And I'm going to start with one statement. I think, therefore I am. Descartes. That will give me the 10 Commandments if I use logic guided by right reasoning. It will give me the 10 Commandments. And over the course of the next few weeks on Thursdays, I'm going to prove it to you. You do whatever you want with it. Use it however you will. But what I'm about to do should make Charlie very happy. I'm going to give you a doctorate level course on apologetics. I don't hold a doctorate in apologetics. But I would give most apologetics teachers a fit if they tried to argue with me. Because I'm going to base everything I do off of I think, therefore I am. And notice, Descartes didn't say he understood his nature. He doesn't know whether or not he's just a piece of fungus on the back of the cosmic turtle or he's God. He just says, because I think, I am. That's not a statement about the nature of his existence. It's just a factual statement that he does exist in whatever form that may be. Morality must come from a lawgiver. It must be universal, applies to all of those who are moral agents. It even applies to animals, but they're not moral agents. Universal laws apply to him as well. The animal, him, her, it. Morality is natural law. Well, Joe, if they're not moral agents, well, it has a connection to you. You are a moral agent. And how you treat and deal with and steward those animals and the rest of creation, that is tangibly connected to the universal moral law. Subdue this world and bring it into conformity with my wishes and my desires. That's the Creator talking. I can get to that through nothing more than I think, therefore I am. That will, one logical step after another. This is going to be a deductive argument. It is going to be very, very, very tight. You're going to play the devil breaking it. Mikey never did. Mikey was a genius who knew logic forward and back. You know, the student professor that I was going to kill because he was irrational according to his own definition. That means he wasn't human. He played the devil with this one. The entire philosophy department played the devil with this one. Next few weeks, I'll give it to you one step at a time. I'll prove to you that morality must be universal. And if it is, it creates a duty because you're going to be held accountable. Because you see, here's another thing. Inherent in morality, the idea of right and wrong behavior, you can't remove the part of accountability. Because if you're never going to be held accountable for it, if you're not going to pay a price or get some sort of reward for the way you act, then what the heck do we mean by right and wrong? Inherent in the definition of morality, part and parcel, part of the form and function is that it is either right or it is wrong. Well, right and wrong denotes something you should or shouldn't do. Well, if there's no penalty for it, what the heck do we care? Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Which is why Voltaire said that if you're going to oppress him, his avenger lives. Well, that's not a deist, folks. Charlie? Questions, comments? Have I missed anything? Did I confuse anybody? Am I off base?
Well, we've had a few good comments go along here, but I think we're okay. And oh, I'm excited. So yeah, this will be fun.
Can any of us argue with the statement, I think, therefore I am? Not that you know the nature, you just know that you exist somehow, some way, some form, you exist. Can anybody argue with that? You can't. Yeah. You might say, well, we don't know how it all works. You know, there's a bigger multiverse. Right, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
As far as you're concerned in the world that you can perceive, you exist. That's it. That's all that matters. I'm going to get you to the 10 Commandments from that point. Sound, valid, rational, and an unbreakable argument. You can't break this argument I'm going to make for you. You cannot break it. And if I give you a sound, valid, and rational argument for the 10 Commandments simply from the statement, I think, therefore I am, you have to make a determination about whether or not you believe in a creator and exactly who he is. Because there's only one creator in all of earth, one God figure in all of the religions known to man who gave us the 10 Commandments. All the others give us different commandments. They give us a different set of ethics. oh my God, if the other religions give us ethics, that means they are man-made.
Man-made. Yeah.
Gee, who'd have thunk? That's it for today. Anything else?
I think you did good today. So this is, you got me thinking today. So.
All righty, boys and girls. We'll wrap this one up. We thank you for being here, for joining us. We hope that you've gotten something out of this that will edify, enlighten your world, your thinking, your understanding of things, and lift you up, help you to think yourself through your own worldview, make your own decisions. If nothing else, to educate you, because that's what we're primarily here for. We have to list ourselves as entertainment because Rumble doesn't give us a choice of education material on our class. But anyway, it is a labor of love. We love each and every one of you. It is pretty much listener driven. So if you're new to the class, we haven't done this in a while, but what we ask is that you go to the donate page. You can find it in the comments on Rumble, or you can go to the Road to Concord or We Who Are Lost. The donate button is there. We ask you to buy us a $5 cup of coffee every month, just $5 cup of coffee to help us expand the show. We've got a few other things that we'd like to do. And if and when we can get enough people who reliably help with the show, every month, and we can count on that, because you got to have a budget for things like this. One of the things I was telling Charlie I'd like to do is for $25 a month, I think it is, if I remember right, unless they've changed it, we can make the chat live 24/7. It'll be a Road to Concord chat for whoever wants to get in there. I don't know. It's just things I'd like to do to make this class into its own community. I've always been about relationships. I know that I'm broken. I don't do them well, but that doesn't mean I don't want them. This is a case of where I watch each and every one of you and I learn from each and every one of you, because I'm trying to be a better human being by mimicking the people I see who are, in my opinion, better than me at being human. So I try to mimic what I see as honorable and admirable behavior. And I learn all of that from you. And to the extent that I am not a full-blown love child of Gregory House and Sheldon Cooper, I owe all that to each and every one of you that has crossed my path over the years, that I have admired the way you handle yourself, because I've taken little pieces from each and every one of you and incorporated it into myself, saying, yeah, I get it. I'm supposed to mimic the Messiah. And I try, but I'm not him. So I look for other human beings that are doing that. And I'm like, that's what mimicking the Messiah should look like, at least to the best of my understanding. So yeah, like Charlie will tell you in the intro, I need your pieces. I know how I come off sometimes, but you should have known me 20, 30 years ago. You think I'm bad now? Jeez. I learn from you. We learn from each other. We're all here to learn. But learning means nothing. It's a wasted time and a wasted effort if you don't do something with it. Many receive advice. Only the wise profit from it. I love the one that people will like to quote. Free advice is worth what you pay for it. That's stupid. I used to think it was witty, but now I realize that that's empty-headed. You receive free advice all the time. If you have true wisdom, you can sift it, sort it. Is it worth anything? You can evaluate it. And if it is, and you're wise, you hold on to it. And I learned advice from, I think the poet's name was Shelley. He or she, I don't remember, but I remember the words. Better a bloody hand than a hard heart. And what it means is better that you try and get your hand cut than you didn't try at all because you don't care. That's the story of the Good Samaritan, where the pious, righteous people didn't care. And the one who was filthy and dirty went out of the way to help. And probably could have ended up dead for it if you understand the culture. Risked a bloody hand to avoid a hard heart. That was free advice. I've held on to it ever since. And it's why I do the show. Better to try and fail than do nothing at all. Tomorrow, we're in a book study with Dr. Heiser's Unseen Realm, chapters 14 and 15. We'll see you then. Until then, y'all stay safe, take care, and we love you. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.